Alrighty there. Greetings, all of my fellow Kung Fu warriors, and welcome back to another dojo session. In this particular session, what I want to go over is a very specific form of offensive strategy that pretty much every character in this game and many fight, if not most fighting games, will take advantage of in order to increase the pressure that they can place on their opponents. I mean, that is something known as Okizeme, or Oki for short. You may have heard this term used many times if you've watched any content from other professional players or just other Street Fighter enthusiasts, maybe even Tekken. Just fighting games in general. Basically, it's what Oki is the best way that I could describe it from my understanding of it. Is it's simply a form of offensive strategy that is used when your opponent is waking up. Obviously, waking up is a very specific form of the opponent. Waking up is a very specific state that the opponent will take if they are knocked down. Of course, in Street Fighter 6, it's Tekken characters can wake up a number of different ways, but in Street Fighter 6, characters normally will either wake up by recovering in place, or they will wake up by doing a backwards tech roll. Right? They get the choice of what to do unless it is a very special knockdown, such as a hard knockdown, like if you get a punish counter on them, for example. Hard knockdown, they will wake up in place, right? So if you punish your opponent and catch them lacking, then they'll wake up in place. But any other form of a knockdown, generally speaking, they can recover any way that they see fit in terms of the options that they have, right? So when we're talking about Okizeme, we're talking about ways to continue pressuring our opponents when we get knockdowns. And of course, this applies to pretty much every character in this game. However, we're going to be discussing Chun Li specifically and the different forms of Oki that she can take. Now, of course, Chun Li is an interesting character because while she doesn't have throw loops to technically make people guess all day long, she does have a very strong Okizeme approach for those that are knowledgeable about how to approach with her. She has a lot of different tools. Um, if Perry did not exist in this game, she would be a monster of a character if he got knocked down. She has a lot of different options that she can do, right? We're going to get into parrying and all that stuff later, but yeah. So she has a very wide assortment of different options that she can do when she knocks you down, things of that nature, right? Now she doesn't have a throw loop. Throw loop is a form of Okizeme, or Oki for short, of course, as we discussed, in which you continue to pressure your opponent after a throw. She doesn't have a throw loop, as we've discussed before, and I'll go over that a little bit later, but she does have other forms of Oki, and we're going to be discussing some Sage enhanced techniques that we could do here, right? So, the first thing I think we should probably address here is some of the most common forms of knockdowns. Let's start with the legendary spinning bird kick, right? So, of course, spinning bird kick has a light, a medium, and a heavy. And the light and the heavy are basically almost the same when it comes to their properties. As you can see, you have 33 frames of advantage if they wake up with a backwards roll, right? We're gonna have Ryu recover in place for a moment here, and it's still 33 here. But if you do the medium spinning bird kick, it's 34. So there's a little one frame difference, right? So why this is important is because some of her Okizeme options are a little different now. See, before what we used to do before one of the more recent patches in the last year is we would do something like this. We would go into a medium spinning bird kick because of our Oki options. But basically what this is after you do the spinning bird kick, you would do a drive rush into her overhead, which is down forward heavy punch. But they adjusted the overhead so that instead of 22 frames, it's 21 frames. So it comes out a little bit faster. That means if you were used to doing the medium spinning bird kick, this is no longer going to work anymore, unfortunately. However, that adjustment works out with the other versions of spinning bird kick, because if you do the light version of spinning bird kick, it still works. See, and you can tell that that's meaty because we're +4 on block. That's not +4 usually; it's actually -2, as you can see. So that is something that is very meaty. And for those that are not aware, meaty, what that means is it's basically a term that means that you're hitting your opponent with the active frames of a move to such an extent that you're actually when they're waking up or in specific situations, that you're actually gaining more frame advantage just because of how active the move is. Meaty moves are usually moves that stay active for a longer period of time. Obviously, a jab can be meaty, but it's not active for very long. However, our standing medium punches, you can see, it stays out there for quite a bit of time, right? Same thing with this. This is also can be used for a lot of meaties too, because her hands stay out there for a while, right? So these type of attacks are also attacks that are used to stuff approaches, oddly enough, because they're active for a while, so your opponent can kind of run into them a lot more easily. Those are usually the abilities that are used when doing these meaty setups. That's a very rudimentary understanding of it. In another video, perhaps I'll go over a more in-depth explanation as to what meaties are, but all you need to really know about them is that they're a form of doing a move in such a way that you gain frame advantage. Usually it's when your opponent is waking up and while you're doing your Oki, right? So let's go ahead and do that example again with the overhead. Actually, let's get Ryu to just block off for me, please. See, if we do a drive, obviously drive rush gives you, if you just do a regular overhead, it's -2, right? If you do a drive rush behind something, you get 4 more frames no matter what that move is, right? So this is obviously +1. So if you drive rush into it, it's going to be +5, right? Just anytime you do a drive rush and you either hit or your opponent blocks it, just add 4 more frames to whatever the frames normally are. It's pretty much always going to be like that, right? So as you can see, if we do the drive rush with this, it's 2 frames. You can still do stuff with that, but it's still not as good as what we saw here just a moment ago. And the reason why this worked the way that it did is because it is meaty, right? See, they're getting hit by the active frames, the last parts of the frames as we are recovering, and they're getting off of the ground. So we're recovering too quickly we're recovering a little bit more quickly than normal in respect to them getting off of the ground, right? So it's actually adding 2 more frames to it. And some moves can be even more meaty than that, right? So that's an example I can give you of what a meaty looks like. And of course, meaties can be applied, generally speaking, to people when they're waking up off of the ground. Those are usually the easiest methods of setting them up, though they can be set up in other ways too. So back to the main event here. So Okizeme, like we were saying, your wake up pressure with Chun Li, off of the spinning bird kick. So off of the medium spinning bird kick doesn't give you as many options anymore, as you can see. However, the light and the heavy version, obviously the heavy version gives you more damage, more corner carry, and now this works with it as well, right? So that's really good with this, right? So it allows for you to make your opponent decide what they're going to do when they're waking up, because if they get caught ducking when they do this, then they're going to get hit, right? So we're gonna have the bot. We're gonna have him crouch here for a minute, right? And we're gonna do the spinning bird kick, and then. Oh wait, let's turn the block off. Let's just go ahead and no block here. So, right, he's crouching. See, we're +8 on that. So that means because of how meaty it is and stuff like that, you can do all types of different things with that, right? Let's get an example here, right? This could normally would not connect off of that. See? Well, let's go ahead and get in the block first here. So let's go ahead and do the overhead again. See, that doesn't work. But when we do it off of the knockdown, it does work because the attack is meaty, so it's giving you even more frames of advantage, right? That's pretty much going to work almost every single time, right? Now, your approach to Oki with characters is going to be different. I'm going to explain it in more detail depending on what you do. But in general, you want to try to, when you're doing Oki, you want to try to go for options where you can kind of mash to get to get your option out. Now, I'm not one to advocate mashing, but mashing can be used strategically sometimes. And what I mean by that, for example, is let's say you wanted to do something like this, but the timing might be a little tricky for you. So you can kind of mash the dash to get it out, right? Now, this is an example of Oki that is that requires pretty much what I'm doing here is her standing medium punch. Is I'm doing a dash and then I'm doing a micro walk into the standing medium punch. But this form of Oki still requires a little bit of eyeballing. You can obviously do Oki on your opponent to get meaties, to get meaty attacks by just eyeballing. Like you can do random stuff, right? But it's a lot harder because your timing has to be perfect. And if you're in the middle of a sweaty set and you're struggling against somebody that's difficult, the pressure might be so high that you might be more prone to making mistakes, right? So trying to eyeball a meaty in the middle of an actual match might be tricky, right? So normally what we try to do is we try to have setups that are so picture perfect that you could technically mash them and they will always come out the same. So this, for example, is pretty much always going to be the same. And you can kind of, if you really need to, you can mash to get the drive rush, right? Just keep mashing forward until it comes out. And then mash the overhead. If you really need to, I wouldn't recommend mashing. I would try to get the timing perfect, but you can see, look at my inputs on the left here versus if I don't mash. See? Whoops, I messed that one up. See? So this is pretty much it's pretty much the same every single time. Right? It's always 8 frames if you can see there. If it's not 8 frames, that means that I messed up the timing somewhere. If you do this correctly, it's going to be 8 frames. Right. So I don't want to get too caught up in just one thing. So let's go ahead and get Ryu to stand back up for us. Thanks for being a real good sport there. But as you can see, that's how you do her overhead from the spinning bird kick, and that's an example of picture perfect Okizeme. You want to try to make sure your Oki is in such a way where it can be consistent at all times, and you don't have to try to guess or eyeball it to manually time it the way that you want it to be, right? See, it's the same thing no matter what. Whether I'm mashing super hard there versus if I don't mash at all, it's this. Well, that one I must have mistimed it, but as you can, it should be the same, 4 frames. Every now and then you might get a mistime, but 4 frames. Very easy to do this for me, right? So that's the poster child of what you want to try to do when you're running your Okizeme. I guess you could say the standard is you want to try to do setups that require as little manual input as possible. And what I mean by that, of course, is you trying to eyeball it. Like I showed with this example here, this requires a little bit of eyeballing, right? See, this is normally +1 on block. What I did was not meaty. It was not a good Oki, because if it was good, I would have more plus frames. This one, on the other hand, was good because I am +4. But as you can see, this requires more manual input because you have to do a micro walk. Right? That one was not meaty. That one was a complete whiff. That one was 3 frames. That one was 2 frames. As you can see, these are, if it's not +1 or a whiff, it is still meaty. +2, +3, +4, and maybe even +5. They're still meaty, but they're not as, it's not as precise. So it's hard to tell, right? Let's say, for example, you wanted to try to, let's get Ryu to stop blocking. Here, let's say that you wanted to try to get a combo, right? See, that's 9 frames. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't reach, but let's say that it did reach, right? 9 frames, obviously you can do this because it's 8 frames, but let's try to do that meaty again. That one's 8 frames. You can still get in theory, of course, because it doesn't reach. But if you had an 8-frame move that did reach, you would still be able to do it. It would just be a little bit harder. That one was 6 frames, so this wouldn't work at all. You would have to do something like this, right? You see what I'm saying? This is an example of, this is still meaty. I use this all the time, but it does require manual input. And because of that, it's not as consistent. The number is not always the same. And sometimes you might whiff, right? As you have clearly seen. I'm getting 9s right now, but I might get a 7 or a 6 or something like that, right? Because the timing. So, you see, that one was 6 frames. Either way it goes, as you can see, the timing, when you have to manually input it, it's not as consistent or reliable. But when you have something like this, where you can kind of even mash it out, you will always get the same thing, right? So as you can see, it's 8 frames on hit. So, yep, there you go, 8 frames. It's always 8 frames, so that will always work because it's picture perfect. Like Luke says, perfect, or no, Rashid, picture perfect, right? So, it's always going to connect because this is what I call picture perfect Oki situation, right? Perfect meaty combos, right? So that's why we want to try to get a very specific setup. We want to try to get something where it's so picture perfect that you can mash it and it will still work. Now, I know that was a long drawn out example, but I wanted to try to stress the idea of what you want to try to do when you're running meaties and with your Oki and stuff like that, right? But now that we've gotten over the explanations for that, we're going to go ahead and get into the actual Oki situation. So back to the main event here. Spinning bird kick, you have different options. Like I said, the medium version is pretty much almost a complete no-go because let's go ahead and block first. The medium version is pretty much, let's get Ryu to do a light punch on wake up. This is setting the bot to wake up with a light jab. A 4-frame jab is like the perfect way to be able to test if your timing is right or not, because if it is right, they're going to get counter hit. If it is off, you're going to get hit, right? So let's do the medium spinning bird kick here. See, I got punished. But if I do the heavy version, oh, look at that, it works, right? So heavy version, the light version, the reason why you would use this is there are some situations where obviously you can't get a heavy like this. So you might do something like this and have to go for a light. But obviously if you have a situation like this, you're almost always going to go for the heavy, right? You just want to make sure you're structuring your combos correctly. So we're usually going to be doing the light or heavy version. The medium version is rarely going to come up anymore just because the heavy version surpasses it, right? And you can typically, after some of the updates, you can go, and most of her conversions that would go into medium kick now go into the heavy, right? So let me go ahead and show some examples of different Oki situations you can do. Obviously, we have this one, the overhead. We have this one, which requires manual input. We have this. Whoops. We have this one, which is pretty much what you're doing is after you do it, you're dashing, and then you're doing a drive rush into a crouching light kick. Right? And this is also picture perfect because you can kind of mash it. As you can see, Ryu's not jabbing us out of what we're doing, so it is definitely a well-timed, meaty Oki situation, right? So you can mix this up with the overhead and the low to kind of trick your opponent, right? If they're not familiar with the matchup, you can clip them with this because now you don't want to be too abusive with this because obviously, as you can see, there's a difference here. That's a draw drive rush. This is dashing into the drive rush. So you could be giving away your intentions to your opponent, right? Right. So you do want to be careful with that, right? And of course, you also have this as an example as well. And another thing about Oki situations is you typically want to have something that works even if your opponent decides that they want to back roll. So the examples that we were giving work even if the opponent does try to back roll away from it. Right. So it doesn't matter if they do that. Right. You can also throw by doing after the spinning bird kick, you dash into a drive rush and then you grab. That's a meaty throw, right? He's not jabbing us out of it, so he's being thrown at the exact moment of his wake up, so he can't interrupt it with a button, right? So that's something else you can do. But something like this, as you can see, is a little bit harder to get when they back roll, right? That's another reason why the picture perfect, as I call them, are the ideal forms of Oki you want to do, because as you can see, because he's back rolling, it's very hard to get this. You still technically can, but you really got to walk him down, right? And there are some situations where you just won't be able to do that, right? So you can still technically do it, but it's harder when they back roll. However, these other options work regardless, right? So yeah, that's pretty much now, like I said, when going through these options, there are probably infinite number of different setups you could do, not literally, but you get what I mean, that I might not be aware of, but these are the ones that I definitely am aware of, and many of them I use myself in my own games. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and bring them up here. But if I missed something, feel free to share that in the comment section or in the subreddit, the Chun Li subreddit. I'll see it. Like I said, there's so much tech out here that I might not even be aware of, right? But these are definitely some of the options that you can do. And spinning bird kick, of course, is one of her main knockdowns. So that's why we went ahead and went over these options first, right? Now, some other forms of Oki that she has are, of course, fortunately, you can't really do Oki off of the throws because it's fake, right? Unless you're okay with trading a jab, right? Some matchups you can get away with this, right? As I explained in another video. Against Ryu and Ken, their standing jab, if you trade with it, you're 5 frames, so that means that you can actually get a trade combo, but that does not work with every character. So if you are like that high a level of a player where you're getting into super esoteric knowledge, then you can technically do something. You can technically use that to your advantage to kind of give Chun Li a halfway decent throw game, but her throw loop is fake, so you can't really get too much Oki off of this, right? However, if you have your opponent in the corner, they can't back roll out of the way because they're in the corner, right? They're just gonna back roll into the corner. So you can do something like this, right? They can't interrupt that, right? So you can you can do this right after. There are some other things you can do against your opponent. If you throw them into the corner like this, you can do her heavy punch. You could technically get the heavy kick too, but they could always just wake up crouching and do a crouch jab, in which case you're going to whiff, so you don't want to do that. But the heavy punch is pretty much going to work if you like if you don't time it horrendously bad, right? This is something that's tricky even if you mash it. It's still tricky to get this to time, but this is a situation where it might be easier if you do mash it, depending on the situation. Right? I tried to be manual with it, but it's a little bit easier if you mash. But like, but the mash is not foolproof, as we can see. You might get clipped sometimes, as you can see there. So, but this is generally the option that you want to do with that one. This one will work pretty much every single time without fail, even if you do it manually, as you see. I'm doing manual inputs here. This is very meaty, and it's hard to mess up because it's two attacks, right? So, you can do that in the corner, but obviously if they back roll, you can't do it, right? So you don't, that's one of the reasons why you don't want to do that just here out in the open, because they can, it would work technically, but they could just back roll. That's one of the important things about the corner is they can't move. So backdashing or back rolling is not an option for them. They have to kind of take whatever you're dishing out, right? So that's pretty much the gist of her throw Oki, quote unquote, which she can get off of a throw. Something else that you're going to want to be mindful of course, is her jumping. I mean, it's her anti-air, right? Tensho kicks. Tensho kicks Oki is strange because it's going to be different depending on when you do the Tensho kicks. See how that's a punish counter because I'm doing it at like the absolute last second. So it's going to be different. The light and medium versions are pretty much the same, but the heavy version is just going to be like a different conversion altogether, as you can see, because she lands at a much different time than with the medium or the light. But when you're doing Oki with this, you could do some interesting things. However, the thing with it is that, like I said, it's different depending on your timing. See, I'm not even doing it right now. Alright, stop back rolling for me, buddy. Look, as we can see, that's something that you can do. They can actually back roll out of the way. If they don't back roll, something like this would work if you just get a Tensho. But if you do it at the absolute last second, that's not going to work the same anymore, right? You see what I'm saying? This combined with the fact that they could just back roll makes this like an inconsistent option, as you can see. You see the difference? He's getting hit here. If I wait till the absolute last second, we either trade or he beats me, right? So, and then this one just doesn't work at all because this is a heavy Tensho kick. It's completely different, right? So, her Oki options off their Tensho kicks are a little bit strained, especially since, of course, they could just back roll, as we can see here. But off of the heavy version, you could get away with doing this, because whether they back roll or not, it's pretty consistent, as we can see. However, you're going to get a different outcome, as you can see, if you do it at the last second, as I mentioned earlier. So, her Tensho kick stuff is not as consistent as we can see. You can't really rely on it as much as you would want to. It's pretty much up in the air, because sometimes sometimes you'll do it at the last second, sometimes you won't. Right? As you can clearly see by the examples I'm giving. So some of the best Oki that you generally can get across the board is to just throw a fireball. Generally speaking, you want to throw a medium Kokoken because it's the perfect balance of a fireball that's moving fast enough to reach them before they can try to jump out of the way, and a fireball that does not disappear super fast, right? That one goes much further than the heavy one, and the light one is just too slow. There are situations where they're going to be able to just jump out of the way if you do the light version. Let's see. See? So there are situations where they're just going to be able to jump backwards. Whereas the medium version makes that a lot harder, right? Whoops, I messed that one up. This is a medium Tensho kick counter hit. This is medium Tensho kick last second punish counter. If I can get it. Yep, there we go. And I mess up the Katoken. Apologies, sometimes when you're doing it live, it doesn't come out the way that you expect it to, right? But the medium pretty much works almost in every situation. This allows you to pressure your opponent further. And you can kind of treat it as an extended combo depending on whether they block or they get hit, right? Obviously, if they press, they're going to get hit. Now let's go ahead and test this out if they decide that they want to. Now, if they back roll, it might be a little bit different for you, right? Like if they back roll, they could technically jump backwards, right? But it puts them in a little bit more of a predictable situation if they do that. Let's go ahead and turn the light punch off. And we're gonna go ahead and Tensho kicks. Alright, see? If they do that, you can kind of rush them down for free in order to close the space. And they're pushing themselves back into the corner. So it's not that bad if they were to like roll backwards and then jump. So like I said, the Tensho kicks, the OP on this is very dependent. And obviously if you get them in a corner, they can't back roll. So they have to eat this crap, right? They just have to kind of deal with it. All the confusion and things of that nature with the fireball go down. Now the confusion in terms of stuff like this still exists. Let's go ahead and get this and get Ryu to the light punch. That's why that's working. See, this confusion still exists. So Tensho kicks, you're almost like always going to be trying to go for like a medium Kokoken off of it. Because that's just like the most consistent option for trying to get Oki off of this. As you can see, everything is so different depending on which strength of the Tensho that you use. How late you do it, right? As you can see here, I'm giving the example multiple times so you can see how consistent or inconsistent, how consistent it is being inconsistent, right? So that's the unfortunate thing about her Oki with off of Tensho kicks is it's just kind of wonky and all over the place. But you can always, especially in the corner, you can always count on a medium Kokoken to get the job done. Now, of course, there are other applications you can use the Tensho kicks with as well, by combining them with other things, you know, in order to get specific setups. But I'll go over those a little bit later. But that's the general game plan for the Tensho kicks when it comes to running Oki on people. It's pretty much going to be a medium fireball. You can throw if you get a good read on your opponent's tendencies, you can technically throw a light version of it if you think they're going to wake up in place or not going to jump back or something like that. But, you know, typically speaking, your opponent does have the option to kind of avoid that by just rolling backwards, right? So, yeah, the Oki off of the Tensho kicks is not as ironclad as we would like, but you can count on this one more often than not as well on the heavy to actually work. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work consistently on any of the other options, though. And that's basically drive rushing into her back heavy. See. But it works pretty consistently off of the heavy version. You're probably wondering what this is not about anti-airing, but you're probably wondering what version of the anti-airs that you should do. I have an anti-airing video, though I don't think I go into full detail into why we want to use certain versions of it. But I'm not going to go into too much detail here. That would be for a more like another anti-airing video. But generally, it depends on the distance and the amount of damage that you want to get, right? So if you're strictly trying to anti-air your opponent, obviously you're going to get more damage with a heavy. But you can respond more quickly with this because with a light version because it's 5 frames. Right? And depending on which version you use, she goes out further and she goes higher. So it makes it easier to hit people if they're jumping from certain angles, right? That's generally the gist of it. But yeah, potential kicks, the Oki is not the best, we can see. But if you get a heavy, you can basically count on doing the drive rush into the back heavy punch, working almost every single time. And if you get it meaty enough, you can even do some crazy shenanigans, right? See, that's plus 14. So if you time it right, you can actually do something like this. If I can get it. See? But it's not it's in terms of combo potential, it's not a picture perfect, right? So because as you can see, the frames might be different depending on how you time this. 14, 1 minute. 13 the next. Right now it seems that I'm getting it pretty consistently 14. That one was 16. See, it's different more often than not, but you can't really count on that too much because depending on how you do it, the frame advantage can be different. See, if you do it from a punish counter, it's 11 frames. But you can, if you do this, it's probably going to hit in almost every one of these situations because the lowest that we've seen it so far has been 11 frames, right? So... But that's going to be for another video in terms of how we structure our offense and why we use certain abilities or specials or normals in order to, in all situations, in order to do a combo. But just in short, basically, since it's the lowest number that we saw off of this was 11 frames. You can, instead of trying to get the heavy punch and then they get to block it because you didn't get it, your wake up move was not meaty enough, you can always count on this to work in that situation because we've seen it 14 frames, we've seen it 13 frames, we've seen it 16 frames, right? We've seen it 11 frames, but 11 frames is the lowest that we've seen it, which means that this will work in this situation will work in almost all of those, right? So it's probably the best bet to do off of that. But that's going to be it for the Tensho kicks. I just wanted to go ahead and explain the heavy version specifically because you can kind of get this even if they back roll or if they stay in place, regardless if you get a punish or not, right? And I'm getting the punish because I'm waiting to the last second to catch Ryu, right? If you wait to the last second with the Tensho kicks, just as a reminder, it's going to be different. The properties of things are going to in your setups are going to be different versus if you actually do it earlier, right? But if you wait to the last second, your stuff's going to drop more often than not, and it's going to be a different situation each time, right? So, but that's pretty much going to be it for Tensho Kiryu to recover in place for us. Next up, we're going to do a sweep. Sweep is also the same type of thing. Like, technically speaking, you can time it to where you would get very specific setups. Like if I get something like this, it's kind of more manual, right? If you wanted to get a picture perfect type of setup off of the sweep, we would do something more along the lines of this. Wait, actually, I'm not doing the right stuff here. That's the thing about Oki, is that sometimes it can be, you can get them mixed up. Yeah, something like that. And that's basically a dash into a drive rush into a crouching heavy punch. And that's almost close to being picture perfect in terms of actually landing it. As you can see, the frames are different depending on the situation. So right now we are getting 7 frames pretty consistently. So yeah, yeah, this is 7 frames pretty consistently. So it looks like you can count on after a heavy sweep, you can mash dash into a drive rush into crouching heavy punch, and it's going to be meaty, right? So now let me see what else that we can do off of this. Obviously the overhead doesn't work, right? Now if you mash 2 dashes, you should be able to get a jab on this. Right. But even if you mash the dashes, sometimes it doesn't. It's still a little tricky. So her sweep is a little bit trickier to get Oki on. But you can count on being able to do a dash into something like that, or a dash into something like this, right? So works almost every time, and then you can even get something like this. Like cash out combo. And again, that's pretty much, you want to do it early because she can move before she's done recovering from the sweep. So if you try to eyeball it, you can technically wait until after the sweep animation is pretty much done, and then do your dash and into the drive rush. But if you mash it, if you mash it at the right time, you should be able to. You'll notice that she can technically recover faster. Right? So, as you can see, if you do the picture perfect, as we call it, that gives us the 14 frames of advantage. If you don't do it, it seems like you get 11, right? Now, this is one of the situations I was talking about earlier where it's good to have, see, that's 14 frames, so this would not connect. Depending on how meaty you get it. See, after that, technically speaking, you will be able to do this. But if you mistime it, they can block it. So something like this will work every time, right? And I'm going over these because, like I said, these are, even if you try to mash some of these, while you can get them picture perfect more easily, as you can see, sometimes it's a little bit difficult. So you notice I'm mashing this as soon as I can. 14 frames. Whoops. $12 frames, see? So sometimes it's a little bit tricky. Sometimes you'll get the timing just to be a little bit off, and then you'll get 12 frames like that even when you're mashing. So that's why something like this is probably the best bet, because it covers the situation. It's gonna combo no matter what, right? It's like if they get hit by this, and if they get counter hit by this, it's gonna combo no matter what, right? So, like I said, you can also do this off of it as well. But it's probably better to do this, right? So, but yeah, that's pretty much the sweep. Let me see something here. So you can, that's what I thought. You can technically get a meaty throw if you dash twice after the sweep. Yeah, that's a little tricky, like I said, even if you mash it. I'm mashing right now and I'm still getting stuff. So, trying to get the picture, but as you can see, They say if it's a meaty throw, if they wake up with a jab, which is the fastest move in the game technically, 4 frames, and you time it perfectly, it will grab them out of the jab, and they will get counter hit. But right now I'm getting stuffed even when mashing, so this is a little tricky. But you can do a meaty throw if you dash twice after it. Right. So sometimes it's hard to get picture perfect even if you mash because some inputs just require specific timing in order to get them to work. So as you can see, even if I mash this as hard as I can, sometimes it's hard to get it. See? So it still does require a little bit of timing as well. But you can definitely get the meaty throw here if you time it right. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna be it for her the meaties off of her sweep for the most part. Like I said, when it comes to doing Oki, you can technically get meaties by doing random stuff like this, but you gotta time it right. This is not picture perfect at all. This is me eyeballing it. Right. And in the middle of a hectic match, this can be tricky to do. You can if you wish, if you are very astute, you can do something like this. But like I said, your timing has to be on point, right? I have pretty good instincts, so it gives me decent timing to the point where this is not picture perfect stuff, but I'm still able to get it to be meaty for the most part. But as you can see, it's not as consistent as we want. We want it to work every time. Okay. That's pretty much going to be it for the sweep. Let me see what else we have here. We did throws, we did sweeps, we did spinning bird kick. Other forms of knockdown. Fortunately, I don't think you can get any Oki off of this. Let me see. Like I said, technically you can, but in terms of getting picture perfect stuff, I don't know if there are any setups off of this. Though this move, getting Oki off of this move is not that important, but if you can, it definitely helps. Let's check the frames here. So if we get Chun Li to sweep without doing anything else, that's pretty much 21 frames of advantage. So if we go ahead and frame kill it with a dash, we get 2 frames. So there's not much you can do off of this, unfortunately. Yeah, so now, pardon me. I know, this is a video. Like I said, I'm discovering stuff, new stuff all the time. I never honestly thought of getting Oki off of her slide. To be honest with you, I've never tried it. I've never seen anybody mention Oki off of her slide. It's such a very unused move. It's pretty much only used to try to be cheeky when you're getting up, going underneath fireballs, right? So, as we can see, if you use the stance, it's always going to be manual. Because you can hold the stance indefinitely as long as you hold down back, right? So, and if you don't stay in the stance, we have 21 frames to work with. So yeah, it doesn't look like you can really get anything that's guaranteed with this. You kind of have to eyeball Oki off of the slide. So we did the slide. Okay, we can also do her Serenity Stance heavy hit here. Oki off of this is also kind of wonky because it depends on your timing. That's one of the reasons you'll see me miss the head stomps a lot is because some of her setups require you to have your opponent lower to the ground. And so my mind has it mixed up with the different forms of trying to do this in the air. Because if we wanted to do the back heavy punch, let's try doing it up high with the after ending it with the aerial punches, if I can get it to work. I know I dropped this a lot. Wasn't always like this, I promise. Let's try it again. There we go. Into the let's get Ryu to block here. Actually, I need you to block for me, buddy. Apologies. Yeah, the aerial stomps are inherently inconsistent. It requires a lot of manual input for a lot of things. See, that's -1. This is -1 on block normally. So that means that we failed to get a meaty on that. Let's see if we can do that exchange one last time. See, now if you get them closer to the ground, like so, see, +1. See the difference? But see, working with Chun Li is a little bit difficult. But yeah, that's one of the meaty setups you can technically get, but you got to get them very close to the ground in order to get it. See, that one's 0 frames, so it's technically meaty, but we don't have any advantage. Technically, you and the opponent are equal. You both can move at the same time. Right? We want frame advantage. So you can get Oki off of this, but it's not the most consistent like it is we have seen. It's almost always going to be different unless you just have God tier timing, right? Because it's very, very hard to do this in the middle of a hectic match, especially when you consider lag too. That is also a thing. The connection will be different. Some connections will be 4 bars, some will be 3 bars, some will be 1 bar, right? So trying to do this in a 1 bar is inadvisable. But as you can see, we can get 1, 0, or even -1 frames on. So using her Serenity stance and going into Oki off of it is not the most consistent. The most consistent thing we usually do Oki-wise off of this, the closest thing to that would be a safe jump. And we could check if it's a safe jump, because if it is a safe jump, what's going to happen is Chun Li is going to be able to land and block, even if they do an OD Shoryuken, right? Let's show an example of something that is not a safe jump. Like, let's get him to see if we can. Obviously, that's not a safe jump, right? That's also not a safe jump technically. If we were fighting a live opponent and they timed it, they could just do a cross cut and hit us, right? Now let's try to do something that is a safe jump. If we can do it, like I said, part in the head stomps. Experimenting with different timings makes this a little tricky. See, that's a safe jump. But sometimes it's a little inconsistent. Sometimes, I know I've gotten nailed even after getting the head stomps perfectly. Right? Because depending on your timing with the stomps and the punches, you're going to the frames of recovery are going to be a little bit different, right? Depending on the timing of your stuff. So you might get situations where you don't get a safe jump from this. And like I said, pardon me please for dropping this so much. But the timing is so variable that, yeah. But the safe jump is the most consistent thing that you can do, and it's pretty much just doing, you're doing heavy kick into Serenity stance, heavy kick, the aerial head stomps into the double heavy punches in the air, and then you're doing a forward jump into a button. It doesn't really matter what button it is. Right? It could be a head stomp, it could be anything, right? If you do it right, and they hit Shoryuken, you're going to be able to block in time. So this is an example of Oki as well. Right? So it's been pretty consistent with that. I'm sure there are other strange forms of Oki you can get with this, but it's so variable that, generally speaking, when doing this, the safe jump is probably the thing that you're going to be doing the most. Honestly, because everything else is is so variable, right? You're not guaranteed to be able to. You're not guaranteed to get to get everything the way you want unless your timing is God's here. Remember we said it earlier. We want to try to make it picture perfect. This is the exact opposite of being picture perfect because of how variable it can be, right? So the head stumps are one of the harder things to get Oki on outside of safe jump, right? So as we have seen, but if you wanted to do the back heavy punch, you want to make sure they're really close to the ground, right? See, that one was +2. We did that like almost perfectly, right? I think if you get it absolutely perfectly, you get +3, right? So, but yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for the Serenity Stance heavy kick. Now some more applications when it comes to Oki. Something that you could do is if for some odd reason you get a EX spinning bird kick, you can do a medium lightning kicks into a jumping attack. This is also a safe jump. We're going to test that out by having Ryu do an OD Shoryuken on Wake Up. See? Safe jump. Alright. So that's something that you can do as well. Right. So now in the corner, you also get some pretty. Now this one typically only works in the corner, but you can get some pretty cool stuff here. If you get a OD spinning bird kick, you can if you get an OD spinning bird kick, you can do the lightning kicks into heavy tensho kicks into stance bullcrap. Right now, this is a little bit tricky because trying to do the stance can be a little tricky. But if you do it right, you can technically go into stance and cancel it without your opponent being able to hit you. Let's get them to do a jab just to check that. So we're going to try this again here. We're going to do a stance conversion. And cancel it. See? If you time it right, even if your opponent does the fastest thing that they can do on Wake Up, you're safe. Right? It's a little tricky for me to time this though, I'm not going to lie. I don't use this one very often just because of how tricky it is. But if you can add it to your repertoire, shout out to Gambito Gaming to anyone that knows this channel. If you add it to your repertoire, then you can kind of trick opponents with this. I mistimed it, that's why I got counter hit. But if you time it right, your opponent can't hit you out of this, right? You see? And the reason why being able to cancel it is so important is because you can do shenanigans with this. See? That's meaty as heck. They can't do nothing about that, right? Well, obviously they can do stuff about it, but they can't jab you out of it, right? And that's actually not too difficult to do. You know, you do the OD spinning bird kick into the lightning legs into heavy tensho kicks into the stance overhead. Like so. Right? And that is meaty. Right? That's a good example of Oki. And your opponent can't get away with this because they're in the corner. So if they tried to roll away, it really would not matter. Right? Same results, right? Obviously, we can't do this outside of the corner because we can't get the tensho kicks. That's one thing that we can't do. So this is a corner Oki situation, usually off of EX spinning bird kick, right? I'm pretty sure that there are other situations like this. I'm pretty sure you can get a safe jump off of something like this as well, but I'm not doing it right. Mistiming, apologies. I'm pretty sure that this is a safe jump as well, but it does require a little bit more timing. It's a little bit harder to get picture perfect because it involves set stomps, but that's a safe jump as well. Chun Li has a lot of different crazy cool things that you can do and learn. That's part of the reason why I love this character. She has an infinite ceiling. Like there's your skill expression with this character can just go completely off the charts. But the cost of it is that it's just so much harder to get things done with her, right? But yeah, these are some of the more common Oki situations that you're going to see. Sorry, we needed him to do a light jab. You can see in the corner here. Do that one more time. To the overhead. These are not optimal combos, but just so that you can see that that is a pretty effective form of picture perfect Oki. Now the hard part of it, like we said, is doing the stance cancel. That's why that's important, because if you always do this and you don't vary it up, then your opponent's gonna know. But if your opponent tries to wake up and parry, for example, you can catch them lacking. Right. So, yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for that specific setup. It's a combination of the EX spinning bird kick, lightning legs, and Tencho kicks. Very corner specific. Let me see. Am I missing anything? I don't think I'm missing any of the common Oki situations. Like I said, Chun Li probably has a lot of different other things that you can do, but those are the more common ones, including the ones that I use myself, right? So that's pretty much it for the breakdown of the general Oki stuff with her. Now, when it comes to running Oki, a part of the reason why I mentioned earlier that Chun Li would be scary if she had a throw loop is because her Oki options are great, but the thing that you got to understand about Oki is that Oki setups outside of safe jump setups typically lose to OD reversals, supers, and and parries, drive, or also known as drive parries. And we're going to demonstrate that. We're going to set the bot to be able to do all three of these things on wake up, and we're going to try some of our common Oki situations and see what happens. Blown up. Let's try this one. Blown up. Let's try this one. Blown up. As you can see, pretty much every option that we use, perfect parry. Now, if your opponent really got a perfect parry, they would obviously be able to get a combo on you and push you to the corner and knock you down and stuff like that, right? So that's the general way that you can beat an Oki that involves attacks. Now, obviously, you can't throw through any of these situations either. Let's try this one. Remember? Now, some of these you obviously you can throw through a parry, but not an OD. Sure, you can, and not a super. The reason why he's getting grabbed right there is because he's parrying. Right? Throws obviously beat parries, but if he was the super, let's go ahead and get him to do that. Your meaty throw's gonna get stuffed, right? So that's the thing about it, is because of parrying, like I mentioned earlier, all of this stuff right here is freaking cute, is cool, but they could just do that, right? Now, obviously, like I said, throwing beats it. But the thing with throwing is with Chun Li, once you grab them, they're free. Right? Because once you grab them, they're free. Because if you try to do some fake stuff, that's what's going to happen, right? Or even worse, if you try to do some fake stuff into a throw, I mistimed that, you're going to get jabbed out of it, right? So she can't keep doing it. If your opponent decides that they want to drive parry you when you're doing all this fancy stuff right here, and let's say that you know that they like doing that and you decide that you're going to throw them, they are free from the tornado, right? Other characters can keep mixing you up with that. You have to guess whether you're going to get grabbed or whether they're going to go for an overhead or something like that, right? So, especially if you're a character that doesn't have an OD reversal and no super bar, like Manon or Zangief or something like that, they could just run it on you all day long. Now, I don't know the Oki with other characters, so I can't give any examples, but other characters like Ryu and Ken have throw loops. So, when they get a knockdown on you, and they see that you like to parry, they can throw you, and then they can run the Oki again. Whether that's a throw or a button, right? And now you have to guess, do I parry or do I, right? You're in a tornado. Chun Li, just parry it, right? Just parry it. Let's do an actual Oki example, right? Parry. Because once she grabs you, you're out of the tornado. So yes, if you parry and you get thrown, you're gonna lose some drive gauge. You're gonna lose some drive gauge, right? I mistimed that throw. Hey, you're gonna take about 2K worth of damage, but that's sure as heck is a lot better than something like this, right? And actually, that doesn't work like that. Let's try that again. All right. So that's a heck of a lot better than eating a full combo because you decided to try to be a tough guy, right? So that's what I was saying earlier. Is she would be a monster if parry did not exist, because she has a lot of options. But the thing is that parry beats all of them. Doesn't matter. The only check to parrying is to grab them, right? Parrying beats everything, right? Every Oki option that you can ever imagine to do gets bodied by parries. Except for throws, obviously, but like we stated, without a throw loop, your opponent is just being free from the tornado, because when you throw them, Chun Li is setting them free, and you can't keep rushing them down, right? So the moment you decide to throw them, they are out of any tornado. Obviously, you can scam people that don't know any better. You can do something like this. Go for a throw. Go for a throw. But it's fake. If you fight somebody that knows what they're doing, it's fake. If you're fighting an opponent, you can test trying this against them, and if they don't know, then hey, you can keep doing it, right? But if they do know, you're gonna get blown up for it, right? It's fake, right? So you can't rely on that stuff. Once you throw them, they're free. That's why the rest of this Okizeme stuff with Chun-Li is not as crazy as it seems, because like we stated, they can just parry. And the only way you're going to beat that is to throw them, and if you throw them, they are out of the tornado. This is not the case with characters like Ryu and Ken. It is a complete guessing game. If you decide you want to parry and they grab you, you're still in the tornado, right? You got to guess right with it. Chun-Li, you don't have to guess, just parry. That's literally all you have to do. Just parry. And you're free. Right. And that's why her Oki is not that strong. And that's why it's doing things like this. You have to be careful, because they do have weaknesses, as we have clearly seen. They lose to OD reversals, supers, and parries. So if you want to, this is pretty much any character, except for characters with very special properties. And this applies to everything that's not a safe jump or a grab, right? Now, obviously, if you do a meaty throw as your wake up, you lose to supers and OD reversals. If you do a button as a part of your Oki, like this, you lose to all three of the options, right? And safe jumps are the only thing where you could technically get all of them, right? Let's go ahead and turn the parry off, and let's try to do a safe jump situation against our opponent. Actually, I did not do that right, sorry. Getting mixed up here. Yep, see? Wrong. Wrong. Let's try it again. There we go. See? So, safe jumping is like, it's technically the only thing that you can do in this type of situation.
You need training.
That beats everything, right? Because if they parry it, now obviously if he got a truly perfect parry, then you're gonna get comboed, right? Or at the very least, you won't be able to just throw them like that. But safe jumps are the most free thing that you can technically do, right? So I think I covered everything with the Oki options. Just to summarize, we went over Chun Li. We discussed what Okizeme is. We went over your idea of how you want to approach using the Okizeme. You want to try to use a sequence that is so picture perfect that you can match it and it will be the same like almost every time, because we want consistency, right? We also went over the different options for Chun Li's many different knockdowns, and we discussed what you can do with those options and which ones are typically the ones you want to go for, the more common ones. And then, of course, we also ended it by discussing what Oki loses to, right? And why Chun-Li specifically, why her Oki, even though it is variable and plenty of options, is not the strongest because she doesn't have a hold, right? We were able to explain that. So hopefully this video is helpful for those that wanted to get more of a general breakdown of Chun-Li's Oki. Like I stated, this is not the most exhaustive list. There's more that can be learned about Okizeme and the way of thinking about Okizeme, but this was just more of a broad introduction with a little bit of sage tech that can be used in your games to help you to get more of an advantage over your opponent, to convert off of everything that you do, because that's generally the thing that you want to do. If you get something like a knockdown, you want to get the most out of it that you can, right? And that's where the Oki comes in. You're trying to convert every situation that ends up being in your favor into a situation where your opponent is going to pay for it, right? And yeah, I think that's pretty much going to be it for the Oki situations. If I left anything out, feel free to add that in the comment section below, or in the Chun-Li subreddit. I'll take a look at it. We can have a discussion about it. Like I said, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of stuff out there. I probably missed something because there are so many options, right? So it's not an exhaustive list. I might make another video going into even more depth about Okizeme and how you can use your mindset with it in order to create more opportunities. But that's going to be it for this video, this dojo session. Thank you all to those that attended. Feel free to like the video if you like it, subscribe if you're willing, and this is going to be Sage Armageddon signing out. I hope you all have a great day. Take care.